Good evening, everyone. If we could find a chair and your seat. All right, please, if everyone could just grab their chairs and we can get going, please. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Doug Treelor, and I have the privilege of being the president of the Canadian Physiotherapy Association. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to this special event. The most auspicious of occasions at Congress. This evening, we gather to congratulate Sandy Rennie, a highly respected advocate of the physiotherapy profession, nationally and globally. This is truly a special moment during Congress. I've been present at 6 Enid Graham Lectures. Previous lecturers have left me with goosebumps and with tears, but most importantly has left a sense of awe and affirmation of why I, or we, are blessed to be physiotherapists. The Enid Graham Lecture recognizes and celebrates the achievements of one of the profession's finest. The Enid Graham Memorial Lecture is the most prestigious award bestowed upon a member of CPA. The lecture was established in 1980 to honor Enid Graham, the founder of our association and leader of the association in the early years. This award honors those who have provided outstanding leadership and made a distinguished contribution to the profession, criteria that certainly describes this year's Enid Graham Lecturer. I would like to ask Anne Finity to come and introduce Sandy. Anne?
Good evening and welcome. My name is Anne Finity, Director of the School of Physiotherapy at Dalhousie University, and it is my great pleasure to introduce this evening's speaker. One of Enid Graham's many legacies was to foster the establishment of a Canadian School of Physiotherapy. And if she were here tonight, I believe she would endorse Sandy's topic, educating physiotherapists. Our collective responsibility. And I say that because educating physiotherapists in Canada is costly, is complex, is highly regulated, yet our very existence is dependent upon it. Furthermore, the whole issue really comes down to a joint venture between universities and clinical communities, both of which are under extreme pressure that's financial as well as organizational to do more with less. Tonight's speaker, Dr. Sandy Rennie, is well qualified to speak to this topic. I would offer that Sandy Rennie is a brilliant professor with a deep, abiding love for physiotherapy, a gift for academic and clinical education, a doctorate in educational administration and leadership, and a 4-decade legacy of caring for students with success. Many of these attributes I recognized when, as a graduate student, I signed on to be Sandy Rennie's teaching assistant at the University of Alberta 25 years ago. I signed on because Sandy Rennie had an excellent reputation for teaching and excellence, and I was looking for a mentor. So what I witnessed in the classroom as his assistant was his ability to engage, enliven, inspire, and yes, entertain entire classrooms. What I also witnessed was his ability to read a class, know what their needs were, and meet them, especially the needs of students who were struggling. And what I also witnessed was something very innovative that I had never yet seen before in 1989, despite my 8 years as a university student. And that was that Sandy was quite prepared to share decision-making with students with success. I saw much less of Sandy after my graduation, but I certainly followed his contributions that he made to CPA, among the many which were quality care assurance, professional identity, accreditation, and not the least of which was his election as the president of the Canadian Physiotherapy Association in 2003. I saw much more of Sandy when he became the director of the School of Physiotherapy at Dalhousie in 2007. So one day, not long after he had finished unpacking, he and I had a meeting in his office to discuss upcoming teaching. So I walked in his office, and I was struck, but not surprised by, the number of teaching awards tucked away in a corner on a wall. The criteria for most teaching awards relate to two factors: innovation and teaching excellence. But the unspoken, often unwritten metric for teaching awards relates to how you make students feel. And Sandy Rennie makes students feel valued. In the words of the late Maya Angelou, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. I believe that how Sandy Rennie makes people feel valued is the secret to his success as a clinician, administrator, educator, leader, and mentor. Please join me in welcoming the 32nd Enid Graham Lecture, Dr. Sandy Rennie.
Oh, good Lord, give me strength. So, thank you. Thank you very, very much. It is an unbelievable honor, and everybody says that until you realize what it really means. And when I look out here and I look at my peers and my colleagues and my friends and my family, that this is absolutely the ultimate. I was honored beyond belief in 2010 when I got life membership, but this is hard to describe, but I'm going to, because I'm a talker. My first slide is of the East Coast, and it's an East Coast thank you to the people that got me up on the stage tonight. Nancy Walker, my primary nominator, Allison McDonald, Jesse Roy, Ann Fennedy, Gail Wainwright, Karen Hurtubise, and Pamela Freilich. And Pamela hails from the East Coast, so they're all East Coast people. Thank you for the nomination, and thank you to the awards committee for looking beyond my failures and looking at what we can do. The 2014 Enid Graham Memorial Lecture. What did it mean to me? Have a listen. It is mission impossible. Meryl McKay-Lyons said it best when she won in 2012 or 2011, I can't remember. You'll see the picture in a minute. She came into my office and she said, "Oh my God, I won the Enid Graham." I said, "That's amazing." And then she said, "Oh my God, I won the Enid Graham." So I do have to tell you a quick little story about the phone call I received from Doug Treloar, our president. So he called me. I was at home, pick up the phone. He said, "Hi, Sandy, it's Doug Treloar." I said, "Hi, Doug, how are you?" He said, "I'm very well, how are you?" "Good. How's the family? How's Leanne?" "Everybody's good." "So, are you going to Congress in Edmonton?" I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "Okay, good." He said, "I wonder if you'd do me a favor." I said, "What's that?" He said, "I'd like you to present the Enid Graham." And I said, "What do you mean present?" Like, he said, "What I really mean is I want you to deliver the Enid Graham." And it still didn't hit me. And I said, "Say that again." He said, "Sandy, you've won the Enid Graham." And honestly, I had no idea. And I thought seriously that this year it was going to be something different, or somebody, maybe it was going to be delivered posthumously by me. So everybody knows about Enid Graham, but the part of Enid Graham that I want to tell you about that I think is important, written in a very interesting article by Ruby Heap, is that she was one of the people that started the University of Toronto PT program. She was also influential in the program in Montreal a decade later. So Enid Graham has played a role in this association for a long, long time. But for me particularly, it's important that she was involved in education. And you know, the other thing that you learn about when you learn about Enid Graham is she had a lot of influence, and part of her influence actually came from her husband, who was a doctor. And she used him to help her with her influence. So she was very powerful on her own. But she used her influence in the medical community to tell the medical community how important it was to start a physiotherapy program in Toronto in 1929. There are 31 previous, I forgot to fix that part of the slide. There's 32 previous Enid Graham Memorial, 31 previous Enid Graham Memorial winners. I'm 32. And thanks to Meryl McKay-Lyons, who did a picture a couple of years ago, I kind of split it up. And I apologize sincerely and profusely because Molly Verrier's picture is not there. So I'm going to blame Marilyn because I used her photograph. But honestly, I just have to tell you that I'm standing on the shoulders of these giants. I really and truly am. So the title of my talk is Educating Students, Our Collective Responsibility, and there is a question mark there. So it depends on which syllable you want to put the emphasis, but it could be our collective responsibility, our collective responsibility, or our collective responsibility. So you can look at it any way you want, but that's what I want to talk about. And I'm fortunate to be right in the middle of that picture. And I have been surrounded by students for the past 37 years, and it's been my life. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about me. I don't like doing that, but I want to put some context around this. I'm going to talk a little bit about my journey into becoming a physiotherapy educator. That's me in high school. Handsome dude, hey? Slicked back hair, penny loafers, white socks. I had it all, man. But I wasn't very smart. I took 2 years of high school when it wasn't cool to take 2 years of high school. But I wanted to become a teacher. I had a physics teacher by the name of Mr. Nixon who just thrilled me to death with the way he taught. Big, tall Brit, terrible halitosis, crooked teeth, but he could teach anything, and he was brilliant at physics, which is why I love physics. So I wanted to become a teacher. So I went into the Faculty of Education, and I was going to actually work with special education needs, special kids. But some of my friends who'd graduated when they should have graduated from high school were in physiotherapy. And I met them at the sub one day, and they were actually looking at Basmajian's clinical kinesiology book. Do you remember that one? And I'm thumbing through this thinking, this is cool. There's half-naked people in here. People are learning how to stretch and mobilize. And they said, hey, Sandy, you should think about going into physio. Okay. So I went across the street to Corbett Hall, And my life began as a physiotherapy student in 1968, Corbett Hall Department of Physical Therapy. Still stands and looks just like that today, except it's beautiful on the inside. I had an interview with the head of the school. So I walked in by myself and I said, hello, shook his hand. I said, my name is Gordon Alexander Rennie, but they call me Sandy. And he said, I'm Alexander Gordon Folds and they call me Jock. I was in. It was the coolest thing. I had a lousy high school average, but I got into education, and then to transfer from one university program to another wasn't so difficult. So I started my physiotherapy program in the fall of 1968. And I had 3 male classmates in a class of 36. Francis Yan from Hong Kong, Norm Smithwick from Saskatchewan, and David McGee from Thunder Bay. They were my classmates. It was a ball. So Norm was built like a Greek god, okay? Francis was a skinny little Asian guy. McGee and I were both just frumpy looking. So Norm got to be the model in front of all the girls and all the classes and everything, but we got to take notes and learn, right? But I didn't work very hard. I was having too much fun. I was also older, so I joined a fraternity, which was a good thing for me at the time because I met a lot of lifelong friends there. But I didn't spend a lot of time studying, especially anatomy. And back in the day, anatomy had a weighting of 8 on the Stay-9 system. And I failed anatomy, and I failed physio school, and I got kicked out. So my journey started with a failure rather than success. So that summer, I'm driving a truck for CN, had to go to Corbett Hall to make a pickup in another department that had nothing to do with the school, and I ran into David Reed. This was David Reed before he became Dr. David Reed, the orthopedic surgeon, and he was one of our instructors. And he said, Gordon, they all called me Gordon, Gordon, are you coming back? And I said, no, Dr. Reed, I got booted out. He said, yeah, but have you thought about coming back? I said, I'd love to. He said, go and see Jock. So I went and saw Jock, and Jock said, you've got to go for student counseling, and you've got to have an aptitude test. Okay. So I did both those things. I passed the aptitude test, and the counselor said to me, you belong in healthcare. Yay! So they let me back in. So I was given a second opportunity. I had pretty strict provisions. I couldn't fail another course. Dave McGee actually became my mentor. He had to kind of sponsor me. But what it taught me really early on was the importance of second chances and the importance of thinking about students who might need help. And it just afforded me a chance to thank people for a second chance. So I graduated in 1972 with a diploma. Didn't change my looks very much. My hair got a bit curlier. But I graduated with a class of 36 people. And then the second part of my journey started. I went to Red Deer for a year and worked at the Red Deer General Hospital and in the Richard Parsons Auxiliary Hospital, at least it was called that then. I spent a year there. I volunteered with CUSO and went to Oshogbo in Western State, Nigeria, and spent 6 months there. Came back to Edmonton, went to work at the Royal Alexandra Hospital, spent a year and a half there, just over a year there. And then in 1975, I went back to school to get my degree. I had the opportunity at that time, I was working part-time in a sport therapy clinic, so private clinic, and I was fortunate that I got to work for the Edmonton Eskimos. So for 2 years, I was the trainer physio for the Edmonton Eskimos, and that's my Grey Cup ring. We didn't win the Grey Cup in 1975, Montreal lost it, but I'm still proud of the fact that I have a Grey Cup ring with my name on it. In 1976, I completed my degree. This is a very special picture to me. My mother on the left, my father on the right. and my late brother in the middle. My brother was 33 when he died. He died of AIDS, or AIDS-related complications from a bad blood transfusion. And I used to treat my brother every day. I'd go across the street from Corbett Hall where I was teaching, and I'd pound on his chest every day. He had lung problems and lymphatic problems. But he was a real inspiration to me. And if anything, I would dedicate this talk to my late brother. But I still wanted to become a teacher. So now I'm a physio, I'm a private clinic physio, and I've done a degree, and I want to become a teacher. And at the clinic that I was working at was an Australian fellow who was an exercise physiologist. And he'd come over to Canada and got his master's degree in exercise physiology at the U of A. And he and his wife were on their way back to Australia after spending 4 years and having 2 kids in Canada. And he said, "You should think about coming to Australia." Lo and behold, the next issue of Physiotherapy Canada, there was an ad for teachers at Lincoln Institute School of Physiotherapy in Melbourne, Australia. I applied for the job, and the lady who was the head of the school said, "I want you to go for an interview with a physiotherapist who works at the Glenrose." Sweet. So I got the interview, I got the job. So I do have to thank my ex-wife, Jo, for us packing up in 1977, renting our house to another physio, and off we went to Australia. One-way ticket. We emigrated. We had landed immigrant visas. We were there 3 months, and we got to vote. It was a really surreal but a fantastic experience. And so I taught musculoskeletal physiotherapy at the Lincoln Institute School of Physiotherapy from 1977 to 1981. The most important part of that journey was the birth of my 2 children, my son Hamish and my daughter Blythe, who are here tonight. And suddenly having children kind of changes your perspective. We could have stayed in Australia forever, but it is so far away. And Jo said, "You know, maybe we should go back to Canada." Again, I swear to you, the next edition of Physiotherapy Canada, there's an ad for the U of A. They were looking for teachers. And I thought, hell, I've been teaching 4 years? No worries. So I applied for the job. Dave McGee was the chair of the department at this point in time. Moyna Parker was still there. John Semple was still there. Barry Pickles had left, thank goodness for me, because he and I did not get along. Kay Malcolm was still there. So when I came for my interview in March, McGee said to me, "Call me when you get to Edmonton." I was staying with my folks. "Call me when you get to Edmonton. I want to talk to you." Okay, so I'd applied for an MSK teaching job. Phone McGee at home. "Sandy, I want you to teach electrotherapy." "What?" "Yeah, the person who's doing it now is not doing a good job. The course evaluations are terrible. Do you want to work here or not?" Come on, Dave, you know me. So anyway, I went home and told my dad about it, and he said, "Do you want to come back to Edmonton?" I said, "More than anything." He said, "Do you want to work at the U of A?" I said, "More than anything, anything." He said, "Okay, take the job." So I did, and I've spent the next 23 years learning while I was at the U of A. I started teaching there with a bachelor's degree, but the provision was I had to get a master's degree within 5 years. So I did that, and I had 2 fantastic mentors, Dave McGee and Joan Loomis, and 2 of the best teachers and mentors that anyone could ever have. But what really helped me as a person was Dave McGee allowing me to teach electrophysical agents, electrotherapy. And I started basically with Barry Pickles' old lab manual, and I phoned Barry at Queen's and said, "Can I use your manual?" He said, "You're teaching electrotherapy?" And he laughed at me on the phone. I said, "Barry, I'm only going to use it for 1 year, and then I'll write my own." And I could just hear him going, But I did. I wrote my own manual. I just threw my notes out when we moved from Halifax to Ottawa, but I still had my handwritten notes that I wrote in 1981 on TENS, interferential ultrasound. But I had mentors. I had David Culverhouse. Many of you remember Dave, who passed away maybe a decade ago. He had a company called, I can't remember the company. It was like Medtronic, but it wasn't. What was it? Electromed Services. Yes, it was. And Dave helped me a lot. Dave McGee helped me a lot. He said, here's $30,000, go and buy new equipment. Because we had really old, bad equipment. And then the students. The students basically allowed me into their space to learn with them. And that's when I fell in love with teaching and fell in love with students. I also learned as an educator, you need to get to know your students. And Joan and Jean Wessel and I did some work with some people in the Faculty of Education, and that's what led to my PhD, is we started looking at learning styles. So I knew that if I knew what my students were like and what their learning style was, that perhaps I could become a better teacher and they could become a better learner, because you can give them the skills they need. We're not all listeners, we're not all hands-on, so there's a variety of things. So we used the Kolb Learning Style Inventory, and we were able to find some things out about our students, which, again, I think both help them and help me. But as a teacher, it does this. Because students love to complain about teaching. What was interesting about the PhD research that I did is that most physios, when you use the Kolb, are either convergers or assimilators, which means they'd rather do things than analyze things. And if you think about it, we're a hands-on profession. We are the drugless profession, although we're kind of drifting, but we are hands-on. That's really what we do. And so what's interesting about that is that when you allow the students the opportunity to explore what will get them to hands-on, they get better. If you force them into it right up, they get scared. Lots of people get scared. And I can remember standing back. I put my hands behind me and would watch, and then I would be willing to go in. But I would always be the first person to put my hand up to be the model. Because if someone's going to do something to you, you really do learn. So I think we're more doers than thinkers. So who teaches physiotherapy in Canada right now? There's a lot of my colleagues in the room here. But how did it all start? Well, if you remember, most of us who are my vintage, okay, and while I may look a svelte 46 in my dreams, when you're in your mid-60s and you've been around as long as I have, you go back and think of your teachers, and your teachers were people who came from Britain. And they had what was called a diploma in teaching. It was a one-year program. You got it only in the UK. And then those UK folk came over, and they were the first teachers in Canada. And they were really, really good because they knew how to teach physio. Nowadays, what happens is that you might get people that come in and apply for degrees, with degrees to come and teach in your programs. And it worked for a while. So when I started at the U of A, when I went to Lincoln, I had a bachelor's degree, but then I had to get a master's, and then eventually you have to work your way up and you have to get a PhD. But that's to become a full-time, tenurable faculty member, whether it's a clinical faculty or whether it's a research faculty, because that's what the universities want. Universities are research-intensive institutions. And in Canada right now, there are 15 physiotherapy programs. For a long, long time, there were 12, and then 13, and now there's 15. And every one of them, according to what accreditation says, has to have a PT who's the head, and most often a PT with a PhD. But there's lots of places for clinical teaching faculty. You guys, the clinicians, the people who treat people every day. And I don't know about you, but honestly, when I was a student, the only person in our faculty that was treating patients for the 2 years that I was doing my diploma was David Reed. Nobody else was treating patients. It's not that they were in an ivory tower, it's just that they were so busy teaching. And when I started teaching, and when many of my colleagues in this room started teaching, you don't have time to do clinical work anymore because teaching just consumes you. And yet, there has to be a balance. So how do we keep up with what's happening in the clinical world? Well, we read, we talk to you, we go to congresses, we go to courses. because you have to keep up. You have to be relevant to your students. If you're not relevant to your students, they turn you off. They don't listen anymore. They don't pay attention. So what happens in Canada right now? Well, we have a curriculum that we follow. For the U of T folk who are here, remind me, what year did we meet in the old building on 256 McCall? 1997? 98. So a bunch of us met at the old PT program before they moved to 500 University Avenue, 256 McCall, and a lot of us got together and created a sort of a Canada-wide curriculum. And it was great, and it worked. And then in 2009, we went to Vancouver, hosted by UBC, and approximately 100 people were there, mostly educators, but there were clinicians, there were researchers, there were external stakeholders, CPA staff, and we sat down and redesigned the entry-level curriculum, knowing that we were moving to master's entry level. This was not to make it better than the bachelor's degree. It was to change the way we were going to be seen by our external people, by our patients, by the world at large. And these guidelines were designed to reflect current PT practice, research, but also moving into the future. What are the emerging areas of practice? We still have 3 primary areas: cardio-resp, urology, and MSK. But there's lots of crossover. There's lots of emerging things. But this is what we did. So we built it on this framework. So in the middle, we had our foundations, which includes things like the biological and basic sciences, okay, professionalism and ethics, the psychosocial sciences, and scientific inquiry. Some of these were prerequisites, and some of them are what we do as entry level as well. So for example, at Dalhousie, you have to have 3 credits of anatomy before you come in, but you also take anatomy when you're there. Every program is slightly different, but we all agreed that those were going to be what we called the foundations. Then we looked at clinical practice. And we thought, we still need to think about our 3 areas of clinical practice. So you need to think of, I don't know if the laser works, but it doesn't matter. So I'm on the left screen with the laser: cardiorespiratory, musculoskeletal, and urological. Those are still our 3 foundational areas of clinical practice, and then we branch from there, and then patients that may have multiple comorbidities can fit across those. But those were the things that we agreed should still be part of our educational curriculum. Surrounding that was something called PT therapeutics, which is where we included things like electrophysical agents, gait aids, slings and springs, all those kinds of things that patients might need to help get better, or to help get mobilized, or to help heal their wounds. And then in the middle, movement science. This is the part of us right now that we're kind of eroding. We need to bring it back, and I think we're doing a good job. And I'm not here to diss kinesiologists or anybody else that does this, but you and I know more about therapeutic exercise than anybody else, because we learn the pathology, right? We can share it, my friends, and we should share it, but we know the pathophysiology. And most of the students that enter programs today and come into PT have a kinesiology background, and they think they know everything. And they're wonderful people, but you got to stop them. Talk to the hand for a minute, okay? How do you give exercise to a 62-year-old who's just had a total hip replacement compared to a 62-year-old who's joined the Y and has no comorbidities? There's a huge difference. We also need to look at our professional interactions. So in this slide, you're looking at things like interprofessional clinical practice. You're looking at the client situation, the client physiotherapy relationship. And this morning we talked about, from Kathleen Norman and her group, a brilliant discussion on cultural sensitivity. And I love that concept of maybe getting us along that line, as Diana Hopkins-Rossell said. Maybe we're not culturally competent, but we need to move along that line of cultural sensitivity. And I think we need to do more of that. And that's also part of what we need to do within our education program. And then you look at the context of practice. This is Canada. Yes, we can be world leaders, but we have to think of the Canadian context. Healthcare is provincial, but we all get money from the federal government as well. There is this thing called Health Canada. So you need to think of the Canadian context. So we talk about healthcare models, and they might be different in Nova Scotia than they are in Ontario. You might go from 16 health regions to one health region, okay? It doesn't matter. It's still the same concept. You've got to teach students about this so when they get out there and practice, they'll understand what is the environment they're moving into. And then you have to think about the clinical education curriculum. So that group, which is called the National Association of Clinical Educators in Physiotherapy, or NACIP, and I do take pride with Gail Wainwright and many others of being a founding member of that organization many, many years ago. They also said there have got to be some standards in clinical education. Now, you've got to be careful with that because it is different from province to province. It's also different from program to program in Canada. But what's really important is to understand what clinical education is. And I want you to read this. I'm busy right now, but I'm glad your phone rang because we were told to leave them on. And I know Louis can let his phone ring all day because he's a grand man. Okay? In a graded fashion, the practice skills, the confidence, the judgment, the efficiency, the responsibility by physiotherapy students for entry-level practice. So that's the goal. And the reason why there's a question mark on my title slide is we cannot do that at the university. We can't do it without you. When I was teaching in Australia, it was a very different model. I went to clinics once a month with my students, and I had 6 to 1. So I went with 6 students, and I would beg, borrow, and steal patients from the clinicians to help educate my students. Every 3 months, I got to travel to Tasmania for a couple of days. It was fabulous, because Tasmania sort of belongs to the state of Victoria, although they don't like to say that. But it was a totally different model. Here, what we do is we shoo them out the door. Go see the clinicians. Get the hell out. And you guys, the clinicians, are saying, whoa, 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 just a minute here. Are they ready for us? Are they ready to treat our patients? How much education have you given them? How ready are they to be out here? So what we need is we need a little more hand in glove. We need a little bit more cooperation, and we're getting there. In fact, we're doing a marvelous job of that as far as I'm concerned. So the clinical education program is based on the same framework. It's not different, you guys. It's the same thing. It means the same thing. It's just the implementation is different. If I teach ultrasound in a lab and the students learn how to interact with a fake patient, they learn how to position them, they learn how to drape them and undrape them and do the treatment, do the contraindications, precautions, do the informed consent, and they do it. They like to think they can do it once, and they've got it. We know that's not true. They need practice. So we want them to practice more and more and more, but where they really learn it is with you. Is that time up already? The other thing that's happened in Canada is the clinical competency framework, which has taken us a long ways in the rest of the world in terms of Canadian physiotherapists know how to do it. This was created by another group of people that included educators, regulators, the professional association, and it's really to say, what are the basic essential skills that we need to have as physiotherapists to practice in this country? It's modeled after medicine, and in fact, the educators group was just meeting this week, and there's a new version of CanMeds coming out, And I'm sure that as educators, we will move into this direction as well. Now, it's very, very hard for you to see, but basically you're looking at expert, communicator, collaborator, manager, advocate, scholarly practitioner, and professional. And then there are key competencies to help you get there. We took this document when I was on ACPAP, which used to be the Accreditation Council. It's now called PEAC, Physiotherapy Education Accreditation Canada. And we took that concept, only we changed it a little bit. We changed it from a noun to a verb. So, because it's a continuum. Are you really an expert? Or are you developing expertise along the way? Something to think about. In terms of how we teach, it really depends where you are. Okay? Everybody says the Quebec programs are different from the rest of Canada. They're not. They're not. Their education program is sound and salient, just like the rest of the country. And we all do it slightly differently, but we use those documents as our foundational pieces. We use our students as our foundational pieces. We're doing things differently, though, in 2014 than we did in 2004, even a decade ago. Blended learning, flipped classrooms, integrated curricula, web-based design. There are so many neat things that are going on in PT programs, and it's really fun to be at that table when we all talk about this. And, you know, honestly, the directors of our PT programs are very open and generous people, but they kind of we all play our cards a little close to the vest, because at the end of the day, you want to be known as the best PT program in Canada, because you want to attract good students. And as we saw this morning, at least for the 4 Ontario programs that were in Kathleen's presentation, 7,000 students apply over that 6-year cycle. It's incredible. Some of the things that we do, we follow what I was doing at Dallas. We were trying to follow Boyer's scholarship model, which is discovery. So the first thing now, instead of, like me tonight, the sage on the stage, right? You want to be the guide on the side, right? So now what you do is you post your lecture up there and you tell the students, read the lecture, come to class, and when we get in class, we're going to do things differently. So we'll go through deeper learning by having small group sessions. So what is it about that lecture that you don't understand? What is it about the concept of stretching tight tissue that you don't understand? What is it about the concept of a stroke patient being taken out of a reflex inhibiting pattern that you don't understand? Because that's what the lecture was about. Rather than having the students necessarily need to sit there and listen to all this. This doesn't happen everywhere, but it's the concept. Then what you do is you put X and Y together in case scenarios. So there's a lot of case-based learning that goes on. McMaster started this, I don't know, 100 years ago, and they've been sharing it with us ever since. I'll never forget Patty Solomon coming and teaching us how to write case studies. It was just mind-boggling and wonderful. And then you think about real patients in real clinical situations. So if you, the clinicians, know that we think we've put our students in that position where they're now ready to go and treat patients and touch patients and work with you, then you have to have the confidence in us that we've done that. And it doesn't always work, let's be honest. But the concept is there. So my vision is that we should all be educators. And I think we are. I don't think there's anything more important in our profession than the education of our students. And I honestly mean that. If we don't do a good job of creating the next generation and the next generation and the next generation, is physiotherapy going to disappear? It's being eroded. There are people eating at our edges already. So we've got to stand up and be accountable for what we do. And that's why congresses like this make it work. There are 15 entry-level programs in Canada now. They're all at the master's level entry, and last year they took in 1,044 students in their first year. So you can expect over the next 2 years 1,000 plus or minus a few, 1,044 new physiotherapists into our profession. But the education of these students is not up to just the academics. It's up to all of us. It's a very busy slide. What I want you to think about is the whole clinical placement thing. So this is now where Sandy's going to get to his pitch, okay? 1,044 students, approximately every program does 30 weeks of clinical education. So even when we went from 4-year programs to 3-in-1 programs down to 2-year master's programs, or some programs are 28 months, but in Ontario, it's regulated. They must be 24 months. And I can remember when I started working at U of T, we were 26. And the Dean of Medicine came to Catherine Berg one day and said, enough, you got to cut back to 24. And that was not easy to do. Other programs can be longer, but in Ontario, that's the regulation because they don't differentiate between a research master's and a clinical master's. But every time those students go out, there's 1,044 students going out on a clinical placement. Okay? If each student was supervised by one PT, so 1-to-1, how many physios is that? 1,044. How many physios are in practice across Canada? How many physios are working clinically across Canada? Not everybody works clinically. So to me, it's not how many take the students, it's how many don't take the students and why. So what does that mean for the PT programs? An abundance of placements required and a scarcity of placements offered. What we really need, my friends, is to have more placements than we need. So the clinician, the educators can go to you, the academic clinical educators can go to you and say, thank you, John, for offering, but you don't have to take a student this round because you took one last time. And I've had so many other people step up to help that we don't need your help. But this is the situation right now. An abundance of students needing placements and a scarcity of them. Why do I think everybody should teach? Isn't that a cool slide? When I told Chet Bradley I found this slide, he said, send it to me quickly. Because to teach is to learn. The best way to teach is to learn. The best way to learn is to teach. A very, very good friend of mine used to teach kindergarten kids, and she said to me one day, from K to 6, kids learn to read. From grade 6 on, you read to learn. Isn't that awesome? I love it. To teach is to learn twice. This guy said this back in 1800. Yay! So why don't more PTs get involved with teaching? It's the FUD principle. And I have to thank Michael Brennan for this. It's from the business world, but Michael and I had a chat one day, and I thought, I'm going to use that in my Enid Graham. Not Elmer FUD, no. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. The glass is half full. The glass is half empty. Half full. No, wait. Half empty. What? What was the question? Hey, I ordered a cheeseburger. What scares people off? Fear that students know more than you. Do they really? Seriously? Do you have any idea how damn scared they are when they go into clinic? But they often have this exaggerated sense of entitlement. They often have a chip on their shoulder. I can do this because I'm a kin grad and now I'm in PT school. They are so nervous. Uncertainty that you have the knowledge and skills to teach. Do you have the knowledge and skills to treat your patients? You bet your sweet bippy. And they have, and you have the knowledge and skills to teach. If you can teach them to help treat your patient, we're all winners. And doubt that you can actually facilitate knowledge transfer. I'm a quiet little mousy person. I don't do this very well. It doesn't matter. Do you still treat your patients? Yeah. Do your patients have successful treatments with you? Yeah. Try taking a student. Share what you do with your student and see how they take it on. It's not difficult. They don't give us time to learn anything. We have to listen to the teacher all day. We have to stop the sage on the stage. We have to be the guide on the side. We have to be mentors. We have to be guides. We have to be facilitators. Yes, there's lots of gurus out there, and I'm lucky because I teach in an area where nobody else wants to teach, EPAs. And maybe I kind of feel like I am a guru, but let me tell you, in my 9 o'clock session this morning, I was so damn scared because I'm in front of my peers. And you need to be able to be honest and open and truthful in front of your peers. And when you're talking about laser dosage, you can't do that very easily because it's an enigma. So to me, what we need to understand is that let's think from simple to complex. We start with our patients with simple things, and then we move to complex. The first clinical placement across this country is usually MSK or cardiothoracic. The expectations of the students are not very high. The expectations of the program are not very high, and the expectations of you should not be very high. This is their first time. Cut them some slack, but make them work. Make them show you what they learned. As they move through the program, they'll get better at what they do, they'll learn more, and they'll come more prepared. And you can then stand back a little bit and say, now you show me. I showed you, now you show me. I learned about teaching through Bloom's taxonomy. I have a PhD in education. They never taught me to teach. I honestly feel that I was born to teach. I mean that sincerely. My daughter is an amazing school teacher. Her mother didn't want her to be a school teacher because she said it's too hard to get jobs. And my daughter's an amazing school teacher. And I think people that are good teachers are born to teach, but you can learn to teach too. So the old order of Bloom's taxonomy was very simple. Again, it was nouns: knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, evaluation. And they've kind of swung it around. And Anderson and Krathwohl wrote this in 2001, and they changed it to more verb-like, more continuum things, right? And you move up that chain. And even today, for Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, and beyond that, you think about the things they learn with. Dr. Google, okay? Wikipedia. These are amazing tools through which we can learn. And I'm so old that I don't know how to tweet. I tried to send a tweet out to one person the other day, and Christine said to me, "Sandy, it goes to the whole damn world." Really? Last year, Kathleen Norman told me a story about how she teaches a class how to use Wikipedia. And they post things to Wikipedia, and then they go in and critique it, and they make corrections. How cool is that? That, my friends, is 21st century teaching and education. So we, as the academic programs, provide the bricks and mortar. You guys provide the scaffolding. Don't ever forget that. You provide the scaffolding. You allow the students to build themselves with you, in front of you, with your patients, on their own, because the clinical world is the real world. The academic world is the trying to get to the real world. So how can you help the academic programs? Volunteer to assist in labs. If you've got a little bit of extra time, call a program up that's nearby, volunteer. Volunteer to work with OSCEs, okay? Maybe be a standardized patient, maybe be an examiner. You might get hired as a lab TA. If programs are looking for people, go to the program director and say, if you're ever looking for a lab TA, I'd love to get hired. They don't pay a lot. That's the downside of universities, is they don't pay very much, okay? So those of us who are in education didn't do it for the money. But then physiotherapists don't get into it for the money either, do we? How you can educate students in clinics? Very simple. Take students on clinical placements. Take them for site visits. Let them come and shadow you. Let them see you in your environment. Let them share your environment. Let them share your love of what you do. If you absolutely hate what you do, for God's sakes, don't take a student. Please. Help educate students by being a clinical preceptor or a clinical educator, whatever it's called in your jurisdiction. There's not enough clinical placements offered across Canada. We need to have more offers than what we need. We need to be able to say to people, again, thank you so much for your offer, but I don't need you this time. When I was the ACC in Edmonton for 7 years, I called a clinic, a long-term care facility, to ask for a placement after we lost one. And this is the honest-to-God truth. The physio who was in charge of taking students said, "Oh, Sandy, I love to hear you beg." And I was so demoralized. I was so hurt by that. And I thought, if that's what I have to do to get a placement, then I'll beg. And I said, "Yep, you want me on my knees? Please take a student." The demands go up. Your demands go up. And we know that. The educators are not stupid. We're supposed to be smart because we're PhDs. BS, MS, PhD. Bullshit, more shit, piled higher and deeper. I've said it. It's been recorded. But what happens is your demands go up, and we need to acknowledge that because there's physical therapy assistants, right? And they're looking for clinical placements. So if you've got a PT assistant in your facility, they need to take students. And if they need to take students, then their workload is going to change. But their workload is going to be enhanced. It's not going to be diminished. Taking a student does not diminish your workload. It enhances it. Learn that. Understand that. Try it. And now there's shadowing opportunities that we need to have for internationally educated. Because there's 3 programs in Canada right now that are looking after internationally educated physiotherapists. And they need the opportunity to learn our Canadian healthcare context so they can pass the national exam to become one of us. So assistance for clinical preceptors is out there, you guys, and I think you know this. They all run workshops for clinical preceptors. The academic coordinators are there to assist current and future preceptors. There are many options for taking students, 2-to-1, 3-to-1. Have the students learn from each other. You can share. You can have half. So if you've got a person that works half in the morning and another person works half in the afternoon, they can share a student. It's a little tougher on the students. So what a lot of the academic coordinators do is they kind of pick the students that can handle that kind of atmosphere. We can make it work together. And what's really cool in this country, a brilliant article just published by Sue Murphy and her group at UBC on their exploration of the CPI and how it works for them in BC. Brenda Morey from University of Toronto and Mark Hall from the University of Alberta, both doing their PhDs to create in Canada a Canadian clinical practice evaluation form. This is huge. Because there are lots of clinicians that say, "I won't touch that damn CPI. I can't stand that thing. I hate it." But it's what we've got right now, but it will be replaced. But even if that's what it is, all it is an evaluation tool. It's what you use during and at the end of the placement. In the meantime, teach, educate, facilitate. Are there other ways to educate our students? It's funny, I was in Sharon Switzer-McIntyre's office a couple of weeks ago in Toronto, and I saw this up on her wall. 1931 ad for becoming a physio. And what I've got highlighted there is motion pictures in your own home. So they'll send you motion pictures to learn how to become a physio. It's not going to work. So what is the future? Well, I think our profession needs your help. And I think our students need your help. Help educate our students. Von Goethe is the guy that wrote Faust. But he had a brilliant quote: "Knowing is not enough, we must apply. Willing is not enough, we must do." If you say yes to taking a student for a clinical placement, you will create such a huge ripple effect. First of all, there's a very good possibility you'll enjoy it. And that's a real physio with real students in a real clinical site. Secondly, your willingness to help will have a really positive impact on them. And if they're not good students, fail them. Seriously, don't be afraid to fail them. They need to learn the lessons of life. And if they're not good at clinic, then you have the responsibility to say, you know what? At the end of the day, you're not ready to do this yet. That doesn't mean to say you're going to get kicked out. Interestingly enough, when I did my clinical placements, I passed them all really, really well. I just didn't study the other stuff. And if you impart that on them, then one day they will take students. And that's what it's all about. It's about having students understand the importance of education so they'll do the same thing. So, in closing, this is what our current code of ethics says. And it's not going to change very much. It also says that in the Ontario College of Physiotherapists of Ontario Code of Ethics. And now that I live in Ontario, I kind of try to abide by that, right? Even though I'm not taking students. So, in closing, I want to thank you again for your sitting here, for your laughing at the cartoons, for your laughing at my attempt to be funny, which is not always very good. This is our dog, Maggie. She is a Nova Scotia duck-tolling retriever. She's the love of our life. And she just made me think about the people that I want to thank. First of all, the hundreds and hundreds of students that I've had in 37 years of teaching. The amazing clinical colleagues that I've had over the years who have taught me so much about clinical work. My academic colleagues who have also done the same for me by giving me new innovative ideas and things to try so that students will become better learners and will become better teachers and facilitators. To my children, Hamish and Blythe, who when they were this big, let me practice electrical stimulation on them. I had to learn somehow. And to my darling wife, Christine, who is my biggest supporter. She has made my life turn around. She gave up a ton when we left Toronto and allowed me to move to Halifax to become the director. And being the director of a physiotherapy program is not something that I set out to do, but it just kind of really gelled the fact that my career has been blessed by the fact that I've been surrounded by wonderful friends, wonderful colleagues, wonderful family, but honestly, I owe everything to the students. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Sandy. You've continued the tradition of the previous lecturers in that your words have moved us and left us feeling grateful that there are individuals out there that are willing to take that and have the courage to elevate the association and the profession to such a high level. And you do it so well, Sandy.
Thank you.
I was going to comment on our phone call. You stole my thunder. Oh, dear. It was an amazing call, and if there's a perk of being president, this is probably it. This is fantastic. there's such a pause and a silence when I said, would you give or present and give the lecture? Silence is golden, and there's this long pause, and then there's an outflowing of emotion. And that outpouring of emotion, Sandy, really speaks to the essence of this award. This award stirs emotion, just as Sandy stirred emotion in his presentation. So that's how special this award is, when you have two men on the phone and we're both weeping. It's and that's the truth of it. So Sandy, that moment in time has been tucked away in the repository of my heart. Is probably one of the most, it is the most special things I've been able to do as my time as president of CPA. So if everyone could just please rise one more time for the classiest and the most humble man you will ever meet, Dr. Sandy Rennie.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Sandy, on behalf of your friends, colleagues, the CPE Board of Directors, and the physiotherapy profession, we thank you for your work, such hard work and exceptional dedication. This year is the inaugural year of the Enid Graham Lecture Honorary Pin.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
Okay. Each year moving forward, we will honor our Enid Graham lecturers with this pin, which was developed to identify the contributions of our most highly regarded physiotherapists of today and those of the future. So it ties well with going into the future with students. Sandy, wear this pin with pride. We know you will, knowing that your peers, colleagues, friends, and family recognize you as an exemplary physiotherapist. Actually, we'll just leave it.
Yeah, let's just leave it. Okay. I'll pretend it's stuck on me.
And again, Sandy, thank you, and for the framed certificate that goes with the pin. So why don't we get positioned for a photo here?
Thank you. Thank you.
And lastly, Sandy, just a small token of the CPA's appreciation for all that you've done, and congratulations again.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
He's truly an exceptional man. Thank you again, Sandy. For those of you who would like to take an opportunity to speak with Sandy, he'll be available at the CPA booth to answer questions and meet with you also tomorrow afternoon during the lunch break. It is now my great pleasure to welcome to the stage our Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Michael Brennan, to speak on behalf of the Physiotherapy Foundation of Canada. Mike.
Good evening, everyone. Bonsoir. I'm going to go off script for a moment because, first of all, I was kind of teary-eyed over there, and I can acknowledge that we've had a few teary moments in the office since Sandy learned about this incredible honor. I think many folks in Nova Scotia have somewhat conflicted feelings tonight. Having an opportunity to share this with Sandy, of course, is such a joy. But as Carolyn said to me in a somewhat menacing voice, we'll get him back. I would simply like to say that Nova Scotia's loss is the City of Ottawa's gain. Sandy and Chris are, as Doug said, the two most classy people I've ever met. And to actually have the privilege of seeing Sandy on a regular basis in the office is something I never could have dreamed could happen when I took the job in 2008. And I'm going to stay off script for a moment because I didn't know what Sandy was going to talk about. And I tried to pry it out of him so that I could say something smart up here about what he was going to talk about. But he actually just gave me a moment that I can't let pass. And forgive me, but it's an indulgence, but it's a good story. My mother was a physiotherapist for 44 years. She was the head of the Department of Rehabilitation at the Ottawa Civic Hospital for many, many years. And she was a very committed clinical teacher. 2, 3, 4 students every year, and very dedicated to teaching those students. But she was a hard ass. I don't know if any of you had the pleasure of working with my mother, Denise Barber, but I found out that one person did, much to my surprise. Mike Landry was the president of CPA when I was hired. And Mike Landry's from the Ottawa Valley, and he was visiting family lovely summer day in August, and I said, why don't you drop by, and we'll have a beer by the pool. And so he did. And it was impromptu, because I remember my mom was coming over for dinner. So my mom arrives, and I said, oh, come on in the backyard, Mom, I've got a guest, but he's leaving soon. And the two lock eyes. And simultaneously, in the word of a lie, oh my God. My mother failed Mike Landry in his placement. So believe in second chances, because you too can become CPA president after getting failed by a hard ass. So that's a great story. So thank you, Sandy, for indulging me in that opportunity. So let's talk about the PFC now. I want to throw some numbers by you. Excuse-moi, j'aurais dû peut-être commencer en français, mais nous allons parler de la Fondation et de notre succès cette année. So here are some numbers. 85,000, 75,000, 112,000, 102,000, and 169,000. So that last number is the revenue that the foundation generated from member and corporation donations last year, 66% higher than any other year in the foundation's history. Last year, our membership renewal campaign generated 58% more money than it ever has in the past. And I have to thank the very ambitious staff in the CPA office who dared us to set that bar higher. We had received $26,000 in the previous year, and our staff said, let's aim for 50, and there's no excuses why we can't make it. And we blew through 50 to 56,000. So that was a wonderful moment for us, and of course we have to thank the members, those who donated, for reaching that goal. We also had tremendous corporate support over the last 12 months. Ortho Canada, it has been and continues to be our most generous corporate donator, providing over $20,000 this year through their one-stop restock program. So thank you, Ortho Canada. Our second most generous corporate sponsor is a new partnership with Drug Trading, which is the holding company for IDA drugstores and Guardian drugstores. And they put on a charity golf tournament for us last year in Toronto that netted $20,000 for the foundation. Same golf tournament is happening this August, so look for that, and we're hoping to hold another one in Western Canada as well. So along with the success in generating more revenue, we've given away far more money than we ever have in the past. This past year, along with our $78,000 in foundation grants, on top of that, we've had scholarships, PhD scholarships, and we've just announced a new award that I'll tell you about in a moment. But total $120,000 that the PFC has donated to research in Canada over the last 12 months. By far a new record. Part of the reason why we're doing better than we've ever done before is credibility. We realized that we needed to really establish ourselves in the research community. So our first opportunity for partnership was with CIHR, the mothership, if you will. And we established a PhD scholarship in partnership with them worth $45,000, of which we pay a third, the foundation pays a third, CPA pays a third, and CIHR pays a third. And that's been a tremendous success. And by allowing us to call ourselves CIHR partners, it's incredible the doors that are opening. The latest door that's opened, un partenariat très, très important, c'est le partenariat que nous avons avec le réseau Répar au Québec. The Quebec Readaptation Network is now partners with us on a $40,000 research grant. The foundation's providing $20,000, Répar is providing $20,000. This is the largest provincial rehabilitation research network in the country. And again, our credibility just continues to go up and up and up. So we're very pleased with that partnership. So of course, the success of our contributions in and the awards out is dependent on maintaining our momentum. And tonight is about maintaining our momentum. So you may have noticed we have something new this year, the limited edition, very rare, very highly prized PFC coffee mug. And I forgot to bring one up. Well, in fact, I couldn't find one. They were so prized and rare. And each year, this is a new program, each year we will provide a new edition of the mug for those of you hoarders and collectors out there. There's a minimum donation required of $50. I think there may be one or two available somewhere. If not, you can probably see them on Kijiji these days, worth twice their face value. So please, go get yourselves a mug, continue to contribute, and we hope that the value will just keep going up and up and up. And if you didn't get a mug, may be able to find one hidden away somewhere, but they are very limited, so come and see us. We, of course, have our PFC fun run, research run on Saturday morning at, I think it's 3:30 or some ungodly hour, but it shows our commitment to the PFC, those of us who come out and run. But please, please consider running. I believe it's actually more like 6:30, 7 o'clock. It's for the hardy, but it's also for those who really enjoy the camaraderie. We have a great time. More laughter than anywhere else at Congress happens on the PFC run, so please come and join us. And of course, tonight's auction, and we have some great items for you. I'm told there is a leather coach bag. Now that was a small C, but I think it's an actual capital C coach bag. We have, I have no idea what this is, Kobo Glow. We have a Maple Leafs picture. Oh, we have a Maple Leafs picture signed by Daryl Sittler. Awesome. Well, it's a Leafs, but Daryl Sittler is pretty good. iPod Touch framed prints by Gerald Paragamian. Hope I pronounced that right. So great prizes and a lot of different things for you to bid on. So please, as soon as we're done here, we'll head over and we'll have a cup of good cheer, and we expect you to donate very, very generously. So a moment ago, I told you about our $50,000 campaign and the success that we had in renewal. And I thought, wow, that's great. And the same person in our office, Rosalby, who encouraged us to aim high at 50,000, came to us the other day and she said, I think it should be 80 this year. Why not? And last year I would have said, that's crazy, $80,000. 2 years ago we had 26. How could we possibly aim for 80? She said, no, I think we can do 80. When we look at how far we've come over the last few years, why not? And I agree, why not? So challenge yourselves. An $80,000 goal means an average contribution of about $72 for each member on top of their membership. That's easy. We can do that. If you can't take a student, at least you can give $72 in contribution. I didn't mean that, Sandy. Do both. Do both. So in order to support this new and very aggressive campaign, we're going to get a lot more attention focused on the foundation during our renewal. And one of the ideas that we had to focus that attention is a video that explains the importance of the foundation and the importance of members' contributions to the foundation. So for the first time, we'd like to show you that video tonight.
Well, over many years, probably I've had 7 to 10 significant injuries. In 1997, I lost the use of both my legs for about a year. Having been told there was nothing anybody could do for it, I started to go to a physiotherapist here in Ottawa, Dave Barry. Dave just started working on release, on getting flexibility. So one day I said to Dave, look, I'd like to kayak to the East Coast. What do you think? He said, I think you're crazy. He worked out exercises for me to follow. By the time I got to PEI, 35 days later, I was able to walk. I wouldn't have been able to walk much more than a half a kilometer, but I was able to walk.
PFC fills a very important gap in research funding in Canada. Physiotherapy research is important because physiotherapy practice is based on evidence. Oftentimes, PFC is funding young, innovative research projects, and it's very much appreciated all across Canada and envied by other countries in the world.
I firmly believe that without the physiotherapy, I would have stayed paralyzed. It was a physiotherapist that got me and said I was nuts, but that he would help me try to do it. Without that, I think I wouldn't have been able to do the things that I continued to do.
So we urge you to take advantage of this information and many other opportunities to promote the foundation and promote the profession so that we can grow physiotherapy research to heights that we would never dream of. We have opportunities over the next few years to truly make your foundation transformative to our profession and transformative to society. So let's maintain that momentum. Let's dream of goals for the foundation that we never would have thought of 10 years ago. Support the foundation tonight, support it throughout the year, and have fun. Thank you very much.